of you for ending your year with us. And I'm really excited to introduce, we have a special guest. We have the author of the book that we chose for this month. The book is Living from the Center Within, written by Michele Rae, who is a fellow pharmacist, but she has lots of other amazing hats that she wears and titles that she carries. So I'm going to let her tell us more about her. And we want this to be interactive. So yes, please. I love seeing all your faces, so I'm glad that those of you who are able are already on camera so we can all interact together. So thank you, Michele.
Thank you very much, Veronica and Lauren, for the invitation. I'm thrilled that you chose my book for the month. It's great to be here with you today. I'm joining from lovely Honolulu, so it's 8 o'clock in the morning-ish, and I'm on my first cup of tea here. What a great way to wake up and start the last day of this year together. And as Veronica said, I'm a pharmacist. I was just thinking, as I was listening to you, that I have been a pharmacist for over 40 years. I graduated from pharmacy school in 1984. I'm old. I've done a lot of things in this lifetime so far. And started off in retail pharmacy and really enjoyed it. Worked in a community pharmacy inside of a hospital system, and I got to know my patients. I worked in a 4-story building with all kinds of different practitioners. And shortly, a couple of years, 3-4 years into my pharmacy career, I ended up doing a supervisor position because I drew a straw. Literally, we had 2 toothpicks. There are 2 full-time pharmacists, and I lost, and I had to be the pharmacist in charge because our boss had quit, and their boss's boss had quit. So there was like somebody in charge of all the for-profit part of the hospital system. So after I had an experience where I was talking to 3 technicians about who got the day after Thanksgiving off in my office, a couple of months into this foyer of being a supervisor, one of them was speaking and she had a pen in her hand and she was vehemently talking about why she should have the day off. And it slipped out of her hand, hit the desk and hit me in the chest. And I got up and said, I'm going to walk around the block and you're going to have decided this by the time I get back, or we'll just put names in the hat. But during that time of walking around the block, I realized that if I were going to do any kind of supervisory stuff, I should probably gain a few more skills than my clinical pharmacy skills. So I took a deeper dive into supervisory things. And at that point, I have two small children who are now in their late 30s. And I would read my parenting magazines and I'd write in the margin, try this with your staff. And I'd read my management magazines and articles and I'd write, try this with your, with the kids kind of thing, or in a marriage. And so I have this love of human development that has always been there. Even in pharmacy school, I won a national contest for patient consulting and consultation and education. So from there, I continued on in this leadership role. I ended up, we had an IV, home IV section in our pharmacy that I also ended up managing and working in. And then we also added a nursing home dispensing to our nursing homes that we had it within our hospital system. And from there, I took a leap and took a job starting up a home IV branch for Quorum. Now Quorum, it used to be Apria Healthcare in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And so myself and a nurse were co-managers, and that was such a cool, again, leap for me in my own human development. We had our staff, we had delivery people, I worked with the billing department, I ran did budgets, had to do joint commission. I mean, just sort of kept learning more and more how to activate people. And over the 10 years I was in that role, which was my last official full-time pharmacy role, I managed the branch in Chicago, Milwaukee, and Kansas City. So we covered 12 states. And the more I moved into leadership, the less obviously patient contact I had, but the more I understood I had a lot of influence on all of those patients. Because if we did the right thing every time and people were compassionate and treated each other with kindness and respect and were sharp and clinically, the sky was the limit. So we ended up having a very profitable region, and we also had a lot of longevity, which was super cool. And I was thinking as we came into Honolulu, the very first time I was here, I was invited to come and be the branch here in Honolulu was kind of a mess, and Joint Commission was coming and they didn't think they'd pass. And so at that point, it was sort of a secret sauce. I don't know what they called it in the company, but they're like, I don't know exactly what you do, but can you go fix them and we'll pay for you to go and you can go early. And it just was really a lot of fun to kind of, as Veronica said, sort of marry some of my love of people and wellness and health. And now I kind of think about it as empowerment. And from that, so I had that foyer in my pharmacy world, and then I also had a kind of separate track, I called it, of learning about how the mind and body were connected. So I got trained through the Center for Mind Body Medicine. I did some heart math, if any of you are familiar with that, got a lot into supplements and all the holistic part of things. I took food as medicine, right? So kind of just broadened this whole holistic health and wellness and really learned a lot about neuroscience. I'm kind of a geek. I think all pharmacists are really a geek at heart. That's my personal opinion. And then this kind of leadership and human development track that felt sort of separate. And over time, of course, they merged into one. And I quit my full-time job in a couple decades ago now, I guess, and I've been doing consulting ever since then. I had a 3-year contract with United Way, teaching mind-body skills through the Center for Mind Body Medicine. And I decided that was my chance to take a leap from my guaranteed income. And maybe many of you are entrepreneurs being involved in FM in this functional medicine pharmacy network. But I had more than several people in my life say, "You gotta be kidding, you're leaving your guaranteed income. What's the matter with you?" All those things. But as we would have it, if we follow our passion, we continue to make a difference and make enough money and figure it out. I did some part-time I still am doing part-time pharmacy for CVS. I don't have any guaranteed hours. I take a leave of absence for 3 months while I go to warm places in the summer now. But it's fun to keep my fingers in that hat. That's kind of like doing Sudoku puzzles. There's sort of an intense amount of concentration required. And it's really fun for me now just to wander into pharmacies and they're like, "No, we saw your name on the schedule. We're so glad you're here." Because, if we can embody some of these sort of mind-body principles and keep our amygdala hijacked to a minimum and keep our frontal cortex on and not run from fight and flight all the time, pretty amazing things can happen. And the other foyer from my background is I got invited to teach at the University of Minnesota through the Center for Spirituality and Healing. Bless you, Veronica. And in their health coaching program. So health coaching is about being with someone, knowing something about health, but it's very client driven. And it has been a really satisfying work in my life to have that practice. I have an office in the Twin Cities and do coaching work. So I utilize sort of my pharmacy background, my healthcare background, my leadership and parenting background, my kind of mind, body, spirit background. I'm also did a year-long program as a spiritual director because I'm very personally energetically sensitive. I have been ever since I was a child. And so that intuition, kind of the clairs, the clairaudience, the clairvoyance, the clairsentience, I believe we all have access to noticing if we're quiet enough and live with enough awareness in our life. And the book came out of two things. One, I did a master's. I went back and got a master's in human development. And I also had so many people say, "Do you have something written?" And so I would send them to blogs. I have a website with many years of blogs on it that I write. But the book was sort of here's a map, a guideline to being human. And what does that look like? Sort of from my perspective, sort of that mind, body, spirit perspective. So it's been a passion of mine to have the book available and to utilize it for book clubs, or thank you for utilizing it here. Often clients that start with me will take a copy just so we have some common language. I personally believe we're in a time on the planet where the sky's the limit. I mean, as maybe all of you know, change goes like through spiral. It's a theory called spiral dynamics, right? So I'm sure you've seen this in your own life. There's a periods of time where there's this rapid transformational time where you kind of whip around the edge. And then there's sort of an integration and embodiment time. And then there's this acceleration and amplification that happens again. And that's how change happens. And I believe on the planet, we're in one of those big whip around, accelerated and amplified times of change. It's very messy. I'm sure you've noticed that part of it. And to have skills to be human and have access to all of our multidimensional self, I think we're really being asked to step up and contribute. I think, when you look at pharmacy, it was very similar for how many years, right? And now we're in this radical transformation again, whether it's AI, whether it's an integration, even in my own work with clients and students. I'm teaching now at the University of California, Irvine. In their medical school, I'm teaching a class called Spirituality and Medicine to 2-year fellows who are physicians and getting a functional medicine and integrative medicine certificate. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Dr. Lodog. She taught a long time at Andrew Weil. She heads up that program. It's been super cool to meet her and do some grand rounds with her with the students. It's probably the biggest imposter syndrome I felt for a while. I'm like, oh, my breath. But it's been really fun to step up into those opportunities. So part of this is for you, all of us, to embrace whatever our passion is. I feel like we all come in with a blueprint, and unlike an acorn seed that's likely to grow into an oak tree, we're not so sure as we humans grow into our full potential and give back our gifts to the world, what that's going to look like. And so for us to figure that out and support each other and be in community and practice our own self-regulation is really, I think, an important part of being able to show up and imagine what's possible and during this time of radical transformation that we're living in. So that's a little bit about me and about this book and about my passion in the world. And I would just love to open it up if there's any questions, any comments, anything that struck you in the book that you might want to hear more about or chat about. I'm not really sure. I'm looking here. I'm not as familiar with this format. So if anyone, I don't know, do you raise your hand or write in a question or?
Sometimes we'll see each other raise hands, or sometimes we'll drop things in the comments. I don't see anything in the comments right now, but I have some of my favorite things flagged in the book, so I thought I would maybe read some discussion prompts that you have in your book. What I like is that at the end of each chapter, you have reflective questions. And so I thought these were really good questions from the book as we're closing out the year and looking into next year. So what event or events have assisted in expanding your awareness to higher levels of consciousness in your life?
That's a big one. I know for me, there's been enough. Go ahead, Lauren.
Oh, I was like, can you repeat that one more time? I feel like that was a very petty question that I was like, wait, what?
Okay, and I might even read the couple of questions underneath it because maybe it'll help expand it. So the first question on this page is, what event or events have assisted in expanding your awareness to higher levels of consciousness in your life? What limiting beliefs, values, stories, thoughts, and habits do you bump up against as you expand into higher levels of consciousness? And have you had a change in a long-standing belief, idea, or thought, and what prompted the change in the viewpoint?
Okay. I have things I can share, but I would love to hear from everyone else.
I think those are questions from chapter 3, if I flipped correctly.
I have a question to ask everyone. How do you define levels of consciousness? Like, what does that phrase mean to you? Does that ring a bell, or is that like a very abstract thought of like, what do you mean by levels of consciousness? Because until 2-3 years ago, I did not understand that phrase or that wording. I thought of consciousness as like going under anesthesia, right? You're either awake, like walking consciousness, or you are unconscious, meaning like physically asleep in anesthesia. That was the only like binary definition of consciousness that I had. So I'm curious what other people feel about that.
I think to piggyback on that, I also, I guess, would overlay the word just awareness. If consciousness seems too vague, like just how is your awareness of the world changing? At least that's what it is for me. It's just like, oh, I'm aware of different things that I haven't seen before.
I think for me, it kind of goes along with whether, and she touches on this in the book too, towards the end, which I really loved, about like the survival mode versus being in a place where you can like digest and download different information. It, you know, I use like the 20 teens as my example of survival mode because I had 3 babies between the end of 2011 and the middle of 2017, and my third one caused severe insomnia that put me in crazy survival mode. So I was not able to, you know, do a lot of like theological digging and, you know, become aware of, you know, ways that we interact with the world around us or within us or each other. So to me, it was just must change diapers, go to work, try and get some sleep. So I think that Veronica's right on with that awareness. My awareness was my lived space. And I just really love that I'm kind of able to jump into the spaces where I can dig through all of this. So yeah, that consciousness, awareness, what mode of living are you in?
Lindsay's giving us a great example. One of the common things that people know about is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, that triangle, and you're talking, Lindsay, about all I can muster is being on the bottom rung and feel safe and protected and fed and whatever that self-actualization thing is way up at the top there, and belonging and being in the world and having passion and making a difference is not accessible while you were on that. You know,
well, I'm making sure that my 3 small humans also felt safe and fed, and they're getting their Maslow's needs met. When it's a, you know, it's a whole nother level when you're not just taking care of yourself, but like multiple other people for their like required survival.
It's a great example. I think, Lauren, you had said earlier you had another comment.
Yeah. For me, the thing that completely expanded my understanding of human consciousness was psychedelics. And you want to talk about like literally feeling like I'm in the Matrix and completely rebooting everything I ever understood about life. I imagine that becoming a mother, I don't have kids, but I would imagine that like that level of absolute miracle of life is a very similar experience where just like in an instant, your entire physiology changes. And like you have this whole new understanding of what it means to be a human, right? And what it means to live in this lifetime and like all of these things. So yeah, in a sense for me, my first psychedelic experience, and that was after my mom passed away, which, you know, that was my survival point when I was caregiving for her and, struggling with all of that grief and loss and anxiety and depression and, living in this way of life of working multiple jobs, trying to do FMPhA, all of these things. And I didn't even realize that I had a choice in a sense. It's like I wanted all of these things. I wanted to climb the corporate ladder. Like I felt that's what I was supposed to do. And it's almost the same thing if I trace it way back even into, childhood and teenage years and all the things and choosing to become a pharmacist. Like it all felt very unconscious once I realized that I had a choice in life. I felt like I was on autopilot for my first 33 years of living and kind of just going with the flow of things and people around me. And then very suddenly, I completely realized I have all of my own agency. I literally choose everything in my life, whether I was aware I was choosing it before or not. I was subconsciously just agreeing and floating through life and letting things happen to me. And then after, it was just abundantly clear of like, no, literally in every moment of every day, I have a choice on how I respond, how I choose to show up, what I want to do with my time, my life, how I want to feel, like all of it. And I think that was very different than before, where there was this more sense of like, oh, woe is me, my life is just happening to me, and like this is just how it is. And now it feels very much like I do have a choice. But on the flip side of that, it's also kind of like they call it the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you start out learning things and you feel like, I don't know anything yet, but then you learn a little more and you're like, okay, now I know a lot. Like I understand this. But then you keep learning and then you realize you will never even have the smallest glimpse into how any of this works or how any of this is possible. And so then you kind of come back, like you mentioned, the spiral dynamic of, oh, wait a second. Maybe I do have a choice. And also everything around me, is happening without my control. All I can control is me and myself. And then you have to leave the rest of it up to chance, fate, universe, whatever that looks like. So
Thank you for the teaching, Lauren. She's inviting us to really take a look at our programming and conditioning, which is the heart of the questions Veronica read. What do we take as some kind of truth with a small t, because we've been programmed and conditioned to be compliant? And part of that is giving up our sovereignty. That's how oppression and control, propaganda, that's how all that works, right? We have to be complicit. And when we don't even realize we're being complicit, we don't even question that or really take a hard look internally. Is this in alignment with my passions, my values, my beliefs, my dreams? It's can be really scary, that transition in as we leap into these different levels. And I believe too, Lauren, they're forever unfolding, But as we recognize there are things that are, Covey talks about a circle of control of things we want to have an influence on as almost always larger than what we feel like we can influence, right? So take world hunger, right? So how do we continue to expand our influence and what we have choices about, just as you're teaching us, Lauren? And how do we take things that are inside our circle of concern that we literally cannot impact and offer a prayer, offer a good wish, offer loving kindness, but then not have it keep us up at night, because then we are once again drained by spending our precious energy, our life force on something that we can't control. So those are all really big teachings. And once we unhook from the matrix, as you're calling it, through psychedelics, I had my one and only mushroom experience this past year. And it, to dissolve into the unity consciousness, in my book, I call it the infinite, right? Where you don't know exactly where you begin and the world ends. Many of us have those kinds of experience, like a runner's high or making love, or like places where you just sort of melt into the unity consciousness. I don't think it's that we as human beings can live in that condition, but it certainly changes our lived experience to have an opportunity, whether it's in meditation. The very first time that ever happened to me, I was chanting in a retreat and just breathing together and singing together. It was such a cool feeling. I felt like my whole skin was very porous, right? And there was an exchange of energy. I felt myself more as energy than matter at that time, kind of the wave and particle theory. So to have those kinds of experiences, whether it's reading a book or doing psychedelics or having a conversation with somebody who's passed, I know is often some of those kinds of experiences, or the synchronicity, right? Or intuition comes. So you think of someone 3 times and you all of a sudden they call, or you give them a call. I mean, when you tap in at that level in the field, in the morphic field, and you live your experience from an interconnected perspective where you can notice the subtle energies. And what happens too as we come together and talk about these things is, I believe they happen to us all day long, but so many of us are programmed and conditioned to dismiss it. Oh, well, that's kind of a weird thing, or that's right, versus, wow, thank you for that wisdom. Now I understand moving forward, or even how we make decisions, right? To be able to, should I take this job or not? Is it time to move or not? Right? Whatever it might be. And you open it up to your interconnected wisdom, your own inner wisdom, the synchronicity around you, an article you might read, a commercial that might come on the radio, whatever it is, but to understand that we can get information and give information in that subtle realm that's non-local, non-linear, right, is really a powerful tool. There's a book by Lynn McTaggart called The Force, thinking of the right person. And it's a meta study of all these studies that are about being non-local, right? So it's kind of quantum physics, but she does this really cool thing. And so there's a whole chapter on distant prayer, for instance, and distant healing. And it's a really cool double-blinded study for AIDS patients from 6 or 7 different healers, shamans, different religions, and they offer their healing from a distance. And the statistics on their blood work, their life expectancy, I mean, it's really stunning how much data we have in terms of healing in that interconnected realm and being able to be connected and work within the morphic field that we all have access to. But to have those experiences and to cultivate them, to cultivate noticing them in a different way and not putting them back into the individual me against the world binary. It's either right or wrong, right, left or right, up or down, and to let them live in this non-local, interconnected realm of experience. Takes some practice, but it's worth it. And I appreciate your stories around it, Lauren. I think there were some comments too. I watched a couple come up here. Any other questions, comments? Thank you for your teachings.
I just put a link to the book. It's called The Field by Lynn McTaggart.
Thank you. Yeah, I really have such a big left brain and big right brain. I like the intuitive and the energetic stuff. And I also, of course, love my, concrete factual stuff. And So I think of people like Lynn McTaggart. I just really enjoy her reading because it feeds both of my intuitive, energetic, and my logistical, logical side. Thank you for pulling that up.
Yeah. There's another book I put in the chat called The Holographic Universe. And that one is written by an author named Michael Talbot. And I think it's very similar. I haven't read The Field yet, but I'm definitely adding it to my reading list. And
I remember reading The Holographic Universe, and I remember I was reading it and I didn't want to step on the floor because I recognized that everything is like 99 point something percent space. It was the first time I really got the quantum level of things. It's a good one.
Yeah. What was really wild is I was reading that book, listening to it on Audible, and on a plane ride to the Personalized Lifestyle Medicine Conference. And Jeff Bland is the one who runs that, Father of Functional Medicine. And he gets on stage to do his opening talk and introduction of the whole conference. And I kid you not, the first words out of his mouth is, "We are living in a holographic universe." I dropped out of my seat. I was like, no way. It's true. It's literally true. And the Father of Functional Medicine just confirmed. What? So those are the types of synchronicities and things that, start happening where it's sometimes you see little things, little signs, and it's like, oh, wow, what a coincidence. And then it's you start getting the big ones, and it's wild.
It is amazing. And again, it's really good. I think that's one of the reasons I like coaching so much. My favorite clients that come to me are like, I know where I'm at. I can feel, I can see, right? If I continue in my development to be here, but I need someone, a companion along the way to help me integrate these things, because they can blow your mind. And that's back to your initial questions, Veronica, setting this all up of what kind of beliefs do you have to set down, right? I mean, and where do we limit ourselves? And how do we access these higher levels of consciousness and invite those opportunities to have something blow your mind wide open? Go, okay, I'm just going to have to rethink what I thought was true about even being a good citizen, back to, or even being a good pharmacist, right? What were we taught? I mean, I know for me, even with coaching, it's like, well, I was taught that if I know everything and if you, my patient, do what I tell you to do, the world will continue spinning on its axis correctly, oh, that's not really actually, that binary thinking is not going to get my patients where they want to be, and so it's much more holistic than that. And paying attention to the synchronicities is a really cool one. Anyone else have a story they want to share about an experience they've had that's kind of blown their mind wide open to other possibilities? And I can keep talking too.
Likewise, I have other points that I can
Other stories.
Share a little bit more about some things I've been pondering too.
I have a quote from Michele's book that I think fits really nicely here. It's from chapter 7. Excuse me, I need to cough. Thank you. Transforming practices assist us individually and collectively in moving from dysfunctional to functional, from functional to optimal, and from optimal to enlightened. And that's not specifically in reference to functional medicine, but I think we're a bridge to help our patients. All this work that we're doing together to figure out what does the next phase of our pharmacy career look like, we're helping our patients go from dysfunctional to functional, from functional to optimal. And then the patients, I think we're helping them have the space and the capacity to go from optimal to enlightened. Because I don't think we can do that for our patients. They've got to do that for themselves. But we can really help them with that bridge of making the space for to get to optimal, and then they can be enlightened.
That's beautiful. And you're absolutely right. To give them the tools, it starts with transforming practices there, but that is true for any practices. And our patients, especially in functional medicine, they're coming, they're hungry, they want to know more, but they don't have the resources. And all of you, what you find is common is mind-blowingly revolutionary often to patients when you get started with them. Right? Even food as medicine for many is a brand new concept, right? To all the different practices that you have, all the different labs that you can do, all the different types of supplements that you offer. They're really all designed to bring us back to balance, to quiet our, right? To make sure we're all aligned, all of our systems, our digestive system, our nervous system, our lymph system, all of them. Because when they're all running at an optimal capacity, we have a lot of free attention and awareness to notice our passions, to pursue things that are fun, that are exciting, right? To move us up that Maslow's hierarchy of needs once that baseline is all set and our body's working, our mind is working, our emotions are working optimally. And all of the tools that we have in functional medicine and pharmacy, oh my goodness, they're so empowering, right? To set up a human body, this completely magical, sacred vessel. I mean, this is how we know everything. This is how we experience it, This is, there's a saying by a mystic, Desjardins, right, that we're really spirit having a human experience. And to know that aspect of ourselves, that life force, getting down all kinds of rabbit holes here, get me going on my quantum physics and what's possible. But it's really something to have access to that level of consciousness that always exists in our multidimensional self. But if we're very unbalanced and we're very allergic or we're very, all the things that get out of balance in our body through habits and things that can be realigned and rebalanced, reset. And we have a lot more free attention to pursue the passions and the excitement and joy of expressing, of spirit expressing in our life. Thanks, Veronica. Yeah, Lindsay.
I just wanted to say I really love that you use both the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads. I'm going through yoga teacher training, and that's all part of it. And I just loved that it's all kind of connecting, and I love that. I also am like very deep in synchronicities, like all the time. I'm constantly going, I've literally never heard this word, and then I heard it, and then I read a book about it, or these books connect, or these movies that my husband and I rented back when there were video stores. I was like, okay, I don't want to watch just this weird video that you picked. I want a video with Hugh Jackman in it. And it turns out that they were both directed by the same person. Very weird. But so I loved the quote, kind of touching on the synchronicities that you have in here. Answers to lightly held questions and insights can come in a song you hear on the radio, a seemingly random encounter or event, a knowing or sensation in your body, images in your mind's eye, a feeling, or an inner voice. Often answers come unexpectedly while you go about your daily activities and routine. Remember, intuition is non-local. It transcends and contains time and space. I just love that.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, Lindsay's teaching too around that recognizing the interconnectedness. It's very practical. This is not like woo-woo, out there stuff. This is like, wow, when we can be human and have this experience, everything we do is brighter. Even literally the five senses sharpen when you really tap into your living in this interconnected way that you're describing, Lindsay. And kind of back to the metaphor around the mystics, in the beginning of anybody's path in human development, this was first brought up to me by a man named Houston Smith, who taught about world religions. But he said, you're on a mountain. We're all climbing a mountain as a metaphor for our life. And in the beginning, the path is very wide and there's lots of people, and you go up the path and you think that your path up is the only path. So it could be yoga. Yogis, for instance, are on a path and they learn yoga and they learn deeper into the meaning behind it and the teachings behind it and the sutras, right? And at some point, if you continue going up the mountain, at night you can see other lights, other campfires around the mountain. And you thought it was your mountain and your path was the only path. And if you keep going and you get above the tree line, literally on a mountain, you can see everything. And you realize it's only one mountain and there's so many different paths up the mountain. So this particular metaphor is about religious paths or yogic paths or psychedelics or, right? And we all know people who are like, no, this is the only way, right? This is the only way to enlightenment, as Veronica said. This is the only way to live a life and everybody else is wrong. And it's really moving from either or to a life of and is moving from that individual to this interconnected. It's either or versus, it's on a continuum, right? And the journey of getting above the tree line, where you can really experience that everybody is on the same path. And as we all know, there are many people on any given path that hang a shingle, near the bottom, and they're going to go down knowing that that's the only way, right? I mean, there are many pharmacists who are totally against functional medicine, for heaven's sakes, right? How could it be possible? What are you thinking? They don't go together. It's one or the other. And it's like, you sit on your rock at your level of development and enjoy your life. And I'm sure people will come and be served by you, but that's not me. I'm moving in a way where it's much more integrative. It's much more it's like, why wouldn't you do all the things, right? And that's something that we shared, to be able to be in community with that kind of belief system, supporting each other, encouraging each other, brainstorming together. It's just like you can fall even into a group mind. I'm sure you've had that on some of your calls where someone says something and someone says something else and you're like, oh, I read that article, and then, oh, now it makes sense. And oh my goodness, this is a breakthrough in our organization of inspiration of next steps, right? So it's this living interconnected and touching into being the infinite self accelerates and amplifies our own natural process. It's not like we go somewhere else. We just become more authentic and more empowered at a more accelerated pace. Great teaching, Lindsay. Thank you. Got a lot of wisdom in this group.
Yeah, I love what you said, Michelle, around how even, I think about this all the time, that it's like there are still going to be pharmacists out there who cannot wrap their mind around a functional medicine approach and just are so indoctrinated into, this very rigid way of science, right? That it's like, if it's not the science that I learned and the evidence base that I learned in pharmacy school, then it's pseudoscience or it's quackery. And I feel like that is really shifting and changing because, look at where we are now today, right? Like RFK Jr. is Health and Human Services Secretary, and people either love him or hate him, right? There's a ton of people in the functional medicine world that were really advocating for him to get into this position of leadership because they knew that he was going to start to dismantle the old structures of what we were all taught as the end all be all of science, right? Through the governmental lens. And you have, a lot of people in the medical industry that are very upset because they're doing things like reversing vaccine schedules that we've spent 50 plus years building and adding on to, right? So it's like, how do we as functional pharmacists traverse this very hot territory right now that is so polarizing? And how do we address that with our patients who are going to come to us with these questions? So these are a lot of the things that I really try to help pharmacists think through, of like, what do you believe, right? What is your personal experience? And then how can we also be open and receptive into believing the experience of other people, even if it doesn't align with our own? Like, that to me is where we have to be able to learn how to coexist in that.
A great example, Lauren, of this interconnected living as a human being in an organization. I had a call from my pharmacy boss, my CVS Target pharmacy boss, before the vaccines came out. And she said, I know you're not working any guaranteed hours. I also know that you are deep in organizational development and you've led a lot of stuff. And we're going to roll out vaccines and we don't know what we're doing. Nobody knows what we're doing. Would you consider for a 6-month commitment to lead the teams that are going to start giving vaccines? So I thought about it for a couple of days. I said yes. And I took such a deep dive into the virus itself and vaccines so I could educate myself. So the pregnant young woman in the very first place we were vaccinating in the nursing home, who was a aide, a personal care attendant, came up and cried and said, will you guarantee me this won't hurt my baby, right? So, and what happened in my interconnected world was I, like all of you, I'm very connected in that in integrative healer network here in the Twin Cities. And we were sharing articles, we were sharing websites, we were on the CDC website, and we were also sharing the propaganda that was coming through, like the news feeds. And then if you clicked on it, it actually went back to the thing and it's like, oh, just kidding, that's not true, right? I mean, and that's a great example of this organization being in an interconnected level where you share information so that I can speak to the fact that after 1986, all the vaccines due to this act in the US don't have to be effective. They only have to not harm, right? I mean, I want to know, to be able to say, don't compare polio to the flu vaccine. They're not even in the same. One was to prevent, right? And now that's not what's happening anymore with vaccines since this change, right? I want to be able to be educated, and you all can share those resources so that you can speak to what is actually occurring and sort it out, I mean, I'm also watching some of the information that's being sent out about JFK, and some of it's just completely a lie. I mean, it's really stunning. And other things, so it's not an either or. Again, it's an and. Let's be connected. Let's support each other. Let's normalize this and world that you're living in functional medicine and pharmacy. The world needs you all, every one of you, to really embrace this paradigm shift of living interconnected and recognizing everything as part of the whole and make choices from there, personally and professionally. It serves the whole planet. So thank you. That's such a good example, Lauren.
And I love that you're bringing it back to what matters most to the patient. Is when we can really honor that, it's easier to separate any personal bias or any of our own muck that might get in the way. Is like, if we can focus on the patient and what's most important to them and their values, then it's a lot easier to help guide those choices and not feel as conflicted, because that's what we're here to do, is help people get care that aligns with their values, not always ours. And of course, we're always thinking about harm. We don't want to do anything that's going to harm patients, but we do have to look at their autonomy and what's important to them and look at those treatment options too.
And I also think that patients that might have an epiphany, they might go through one of these experiences like we're talking about today, where all of a sudden they have a different experience and their mind is blown open about, wow, I feel betrayed, for instance. I mean, I've had patients say that. I was bought into this hook, line, and sinker. I never even researched anything. Now I understand whatever, even with food. Like, how can this be legal that this is in our food when it's known to cause cancer, for instance? Right. And to have people go through those kind of existential crises and have you be able to meet them there and just ask a question. You don't have to jump in. We don't have to fix it. We don't have to argue with them. We don't have to do anything. Just to say, it sounds like you're really upset about that, right? Just to walk with them through their experience. But I definitely think that the more people take a deeper dive into their health, and I know for me, I just had a conversation with my cousin yesterday whose hubby had some open heart surgery and wants to go on a statin, and talking through the pros and cons, right? And she's like, and I'm even making my own laundry soap. I can't believe all these chemicals. I have this app now and I put it on the product and it tells me all the stuff in it that's terrible. And, and I'm the one that they're talking to about it, right? Not maybe their neighbors who might think they're crazy, but we want to be that safe place for people to have those epiphanies and say, yep, I knew what I knew then, and now I know something different. I'm more expansive. I'm more inclusive. And all of the above is true versus this either or thinking and doing. So I appreciate what you're saying, Veronica. And for us to continue our own human development so that we get in that space where we're not triggered when somebody says something to us that is opposed to our perspective. We can hold space for them and not feel like we need to preach or, move into the expert or dismiss them, right? Very applicable. I know we're winding down to our hour is about finished here.
Does anybody have anything they want to share before we close out?
Well, I just want to say thank you, Veronica, for leading us through this book club this year. It has been absolutely amazing. And I'm really excited for 2026 and everything we have planned for the year ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm so grateful, Michele, that you helped us close out the year. I think your book and the language it gives us around changing our belief patterns or identifying the things that are limiting beliefs for us, just really helpful in our entrepreneurial journey. And so I think it's a wonderful way to end this year and start the new year with just having some more language around where we want to go with our professional and personal development. We've got some good language to do that.
I really appreciate the opportunity and wish you all the very best in your organization and throughout the new year.
Cool. Thank you all. Have a happy and healthy 2026, and we'll see you in January. Oh, I don't know, since I got bumped off, maybe we didn't hear, we are not going to do a book in January. We're going to take the month of January off. We'll still meet at the end of the month, and we will get your list of books for 2026 sent out in January. But don't worry, there's no book in January. We're just going to meet and enjoy each other's company at the end of the month next year. All right. Thank you, everyone. See you in the new year.
Bye.